Hi guys! So today I am doing an arc review. Again, I know I've made it through 3 so far, really proud of myself. So you can apparently check out that TBR again because I'm doing it so far. But today I have an arc, so thank you to Edelweiss and the publisher for giving that to me for my free and fair review. And that book that we're talking about today is The Duchess Takes a Husband by Harper St. George. Now, this is the 4th book in the Gilded Heiresses series. So while the story is very contained to itself, obviously there will be mild spoilers because the character that this is about, Camille specifically, has showed up in all 3 previous books, and her situation has changed quite a bit over the course of those 4 books. So if you don't want to know those details, you may want to go check out the first book, which is The Heiress Gets a Duke, and see if the series is for you. Otherwise, again, not actively trying to spoil major plot points from the first 3 books, or this one for that matter, obviously, but just a warning. So again, the first 3 books in the series, Heiress Gets a Duke is the first one, then there's The Devil and the Heiress, The Lady Tempts an Heir, and then The Duchess Takes a Husband. And nominally, the first 3 books were about the Crenshaw siblings. There's 2 daughters and a son. And the Crenshaw siblings are heirs and heiresses of a massively rich American family who go to British London society and basically try to get titled husbands, particularly for the girls, because they have a lot of money, and there are some people in London who have titles but no money. And the 2 ladies in particular, August and Violet, they really do not want to play this game. And one of the reasons they really don't want to play this game is because they have followed their friend Camille to London. And Camille is another daughter of a very rich American family who found herself a duke who married her for her money, essentially. And her family got the title. She got the title of Duchess. And he got all of their money to revitalize his estates. However, Camille's marriage is terrible. Her husband is much older than her. He is emotionally and psychologically abusive, slightly to the actual physical side, doesn't actually hit her, but he does, leave bruises and stuff on her body. So that is a big point. Not that you see it necessarily, but it is discussed throughout this book. So again, if that is not a topic that you would like to think about, read about, hear about, then recovery from that kind of trauma, this is also not the book for you, and I encourage you to go on to a different one. You could read the first 3 books. Camille is there in the background a little bit, but again, that is a big point of her emotional journey. What I thought was really interesting was in the acknowledgments of The Duchess Takes a Husband, Harper St. George, the author, says that she never intended to write Camille's story, that it was a story that really just felt more and more important as the Crenshaw sibling books went along. And honestly, I cannot imagine not getting to see Camille have a happy ending after the first 3 books because she was in such an awful marriage. And again, I know this book wasn't planned, but I'm really happy that it exists. One of the other things to know about these books is that they are very historically feminist forward facing. And so August, for example, who is the topic of the first book, she is a daughter, obviously. And so by the standards of her society, she's only meant for a couple of things that she is just not about. She doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want to have kids, but she's very good at math and helping to run her father's business. And so that was a part of the first one. Different elements of the suffragist movement come up. The Lady Helena, who's in the 3rd book, she is a widow and she runs a home for women who get pregnant out of wedlock and helping to support them at a time in society when that's not really done. So that was one of the things that drew me to this series in particular, and I do think that Camille's story is one of the ones that intersects with the emerging suffragette movement in England probably the most. So enough about the background. So The Duchess Takes a Husband is Camille's story. It is a lot of her perspective, but it is a dual POV, which is wonderful. That's my favorite thing. And Camille at this point has been widowed. She has been freed from her awful, awful marriage, but she has realized that she has been unable to enjoy having sex with a guy. And she's like, okay, is there something broken with me? Is there something wrong with me? Well, my friend Violet is married to a guy who has a half-brother who is just very debonair and runs a club that admits both men and women, and he seems to have a very active and very free relationship, dating life. He's not really dating these women. So she decides, hey, I'm going to go down to this club and I'm going to proposition him to spend one night with me to tutor me in the ways of sleeping with a man and see if I can enjoy it. So right off the bat, if you were not ready for a woman to put herself for me, it was like a very awkward situation. It's happening. So she goes down to Jacob's club and she's like, hey, you seem really like footloose and fancy free with the ladies. Will you sleep with me? And Jacob Thorne, the proprietor of the club, who has showed up in a couple, very briefly in most of the other 3 books, he is just kind of like, what? Because he has been kind of lusting after Camille for a very long time, but he thought that she was very out of his league. And as someone who was born out of wedlock, he was born to a titled father, and his mother was his mistress. They weren't married. And he has this view of love as something that turns into an obsession and is not very healthy. So he just feels like he already is kind of a little obsessed with Camille and that this is just not a great idea, so he says no. Camille goes away. It's very awkward. She avoids him for a while. But then Jacob gets him into a position where he's trying to open a new club in Paris, and the investors that he's trying to bring on are worried about his womanizing. And so they say, listen, we are not going to give you money unless you become engaged to be married, because we can't have you like distracting the women that might be employed at the club. So Jacob lies and said, well, good news, gentlemen. In fact, I am recently engaged, which is of course a lie. And then he has to go back to Camille and he's like, listen, would you pretend to be my fiance? And Camille says, yes, but only if you agree to my original terms. So now that they both need something from the other person, now they're ready to enter into a business partnership. Yeah, there's not a lot of business involved in this, guys. Camille's story is really the heart of this book. Like I said, it is dual POV, but it's kind of like the stuff that happens when Jacob is in command are either like about Camille and seeing some of Camille's actions from the outside, or just like moving the plot along. It is Camille's emotional, physical, spiritual like journey that is going on in this book. And it kind of does make Jacob, even though he has some of his own stuff going on that could have been delved into a little bit more deeply or dealt with in a more nuanced fashion, like, you know, he's just kind of there to support her on this journey, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm definitely more of a fan of books where the two people in the relationship grow together, and that's not really Jacob's function here. Camille is trying to figure out what is wrong with her, and as a past victim of abuse, she has kind of internalized that it's her fault. Everything that happened, you know, there's something wrong with her, and she knows that she was treated incorrectly, improperly, terribly by her husband, but she's just really not able to see outside of the situation. And so one of the most powerful things that happens is that Jacob comes in and he says, none of this was your fault, and you were a victim of abuse. And that's really, really hard for her to hear, but you know, that is the moment for her where she's able to kind of start taking back control of her life. I was not deeply a fan by how much of that journey had to be supported by Jacob, but that is the moment also where it gets very connected to the suffragette movement, because, you know, Camille protesting and hearing speeches about women's rights helps her again along on this journey. So that's kind of how all of those things are interconnected. I think part of the thing that made this book kind of feel slightly uneven is that, you know, it starts off with such a bang of Camille and Jacob coming together and having this absolutely awkward proposition meeting that goes poorly. And then, you know, they have to like renegotiate terms and figure all this out. So there's like this fake engagement thing that is happening over here, and then there's Camille's emotional journey going on over here. There's the suffragette movement going on over here. And at certain points it felt like it was either trying to do too much, or the thing that it was focusing on was not something that I really wanted to hear that much about, right? So for example, I really wanted Camille and Jacob to spend a little bit more time together than they did. Then there were also like long like suffragette meetings or like board meetings for Helena's charity, and they're talking about real and serious issues, but I was like, okay, but like Camille's already on this emotional journey and there's already this romance going on, and like, can't we get back to either of those things because I care less about this? Which again was weird because that forward facing like feminist historical story, some historical figures have showed up in these books. I like that element. In this book I was like, too much going on, too much. I think this book was trying to say a lot of important things while also being a romance novel, and those things are not mutually exclusive, but the thing was that it was trying to say too many important things. And I think that it could have been streamlined a bit if it had picked like one and then been able to weave more of the romance and the emotional personal journey into the plot that way. At the same time though, I have a really hard time like talking poorly about a book because it was trying to do a lot of important things. I think I've talked about this in the past, there are a lot of books that treat, you know, mental health or, you know, instances of any kind of abuse, and they're like, they have been fixed by love. And this one really tried to deal with it and handle it and show a personal journey of growth that wasn't entirely wrapped up into Jacob, even if he really was the catalyst for Camille. And so even though I felt like it was kind of uneven, I still can't fault it for trying to do good things. I think the first 3 books in the series have balanced the romance and the social aspects of the books a little bit better. However, I think that this is definitely the most emotional book. So while it's not the best like plotted or paced book in the series, I think it was a really good way for the series to end. I mean, they're not like my favorite series of all time, right? But I don't read a lot of historical romance anymore. And it takes a really special series to get me to A, just start it, and B, to read like all 4 books in it, right? So even though I've been like, I'm not sure about this book, I really do think that this is just a special series for me. I've enjoyed it. I haven't, you know, given it a gold medal or anything, but if you're looking for a new historical romance series that does some different things and is interesting, but it's also very cute and fun and good romances, I would enjoy all 4 books in the series, just knowing that some are a little better than others. But that happens in every series, right? So that's just normal. All right, I've gone off enough about this book. I'm gonna stop it there. This is an ARC review, so if you are watching this review directly at time of posting, it is not out yet, but it will be soon, so you can start with those other 3 books and maybe be ready for this book's actual release and get them from your local library or your local bookstore and just dig in and see what you think about the first one. Because if you don't like the first one, then, I mean, you won't like the rest of them. So that's a great place to start, and, you know, you can binge the other 3 books and be ready for this release date. So thank you so much, guys. We'll see if I can continue on chugging with my 4th ARC in a row. We'll see. There's supposed to be 18 of them, guys. Nobody knows. Thanks, guys. Bye.